Hello, this is George Pruitt from www.georgepruitt.com, the website that goes along with the books I have sold. And you can purchase these books at Amazon.com. You just look for George Pruitt as the author. What I'm going to show today is a simple day trading system that can trade the ES, and that's what we're looking at right now on the chart is a 5-minute bar of the ES. And the system is very simple. It's going to sell at different levels throughout the trading day, and it can put on up to 3 contracts. And then after the third contract is put on, a trailing stop mechanism is put into place to try to take profits. Hopefully let the profits run as far as they can before the rebound. Now these blue lines and these red lines are equidistant apart. They're 3 handles apart. And I overlaid the chart with this indicator to show where we're going to be selling. Right here's our first sell from the open. This is the opening of the day, the 9:30 open, because we're using ES.D. And once the market moves 3 handles down, we put a sell stop in, and we get elected. Okay, the market then trades for several hours in congestion. As you can tell, there's not much movement up and down. And then finally some news comes out, probably post-lunch, and the market starts selling off. Well, the system should be smart enough to have the stops in place to sell another unit at 3 handles below the prior sell point. So it does. And then we're going to sell yet another 3 handles below this prior sell unit. So first off, we're going to add positions. It's a pyramiding scheme. So we're going to add positions as the market moves 3, 6, and 9 full points below the opening tick. And like I said earlier, these lines are 3 points apart. This is a great day because it took advantage of all 3. It was able to put all 3 contracts on and then take a nice profit. Now, the objective of this simple system is to capture those very infrequent trend days. Most of the trading days that we encounter when we day trade have some congestive component, which is probably the majority of the trading day. This had a congestive component for a little bit less than half the trading day. So the system was prepared ahead of time to say, okay, I'm going to be ready for any type of trend, and once the trend starts manifesting, as it did here, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, and then I'm going to ride it as far as I can, and I'm going to cover for a nice profit on a trailing stop. Okay, this looks quite interesting. This one day is only one day. Of course, if you wanted to put something like this into effect, you'd want to test it on as much history as you possibly could. So I'm not trying to sell a system. The only thing I'm trying to do is teach a little bit of EasyLanguage. And when it comes to pyramiding, EasyLanguage is not as easy as one might think. If you're placing one trade a day or one trade a week, got a profit objective and a protective stop, the program that goes into that is quite easy. And with the tools that EasyLanguage provides, someone that's not really a programmer would probably not have much of a problem programming that. However, in this case, we're putting multiple trades on during a trading day using intraday data, so the complexity of the programming increases exponentially. The tools that EasyLanguage provides works so-so. Sometimes you have to override some of the tools. You have to use little tricks, and I'm going to go over all that with this session. The first thing I want to do is I want to approach this programming problem from I guess a brute force approach. I want to think as if I'm not a professional programmer, but I do know a little bit about if-thens and buys and sells and everything it takes to build a trading system. So from that perspective, let's go ahead and build this system that hopefully replicates what's on the screen. So first off, let's go ahead and go to the EasyLanguage editor. The name of this editor has changed, but it's been the TradeStation Development Environment, the TDE, for a few years now. I remember just calling the EasyLanguage editor or Power Editor. I can't remember exactly what the name was originally. I've been programming with TradeStation for many, many, many years. So let's approach this from the perspective of putting multiple orders in on the same day. So what we want to do is when the market opens, we want to say, okay, computer, after the market opens, sell me 1 unit at the open tick, open price, minus 3 handles. So let's go ahead and program that. I've got most of this already programmed, so we're just going to copy and paste the code instead of me having to type it. So the first thing we do is this here. Okay, let's look at this, because we've got to do a couple things before this would be verifiable, or you couldn't compile this because there's a variable in there that it doesn't recognize, and that variable is called MP. Now basically what I'm saying here is if the market position is equal to 0, so you have no position, you're not long, you're not short, you're just flat. Let's then sell short on the next bar at the opening of the day minus 3 on a stop. Now 3, since we're dealing with ESs, 3 points or 3 handles would be something like from 2475 to 2472. This variable here, the 3, we could program that and make it a variable, or we could make it an input, and we'll probably do that a little further down the line. But the first thing that we need to look at, because this will not compile, so if you try to build this, it's going to come back and it's going to tell you there's a problem with MP. Let me see what the output looks like. I shrunk it down, which I shouldn't have done, but it says unknown identifier. Now, TradeStation provides a function called market position. So what we need to do is, I like using a variable name when I call the function. So I like to store whatever our market position is into a variable. And the variable in this case is MP. So what we got to do is we got to define what MP is. So I'm going to go vars MP. I'm going to set it initially to 0. I'm going to initialize it to 0. Okay, now what I've done here is I've declared the variable MP as a variable, and I've initiated it to the value of 0. Let's see if this compiles. Hey, it compiled. Wonderful. Okay, so this makes sense thus far, right? If market position equals 0, then sell short next bar at open of the day minus 3. Now, how does MP know if the market position is equal to 0? Well, we have to define that. We got to say, okay, MP is equal to the current market position. So market position is a built-in function in TradeStation EasyLanguage. So the first thing I do on every bar, I'll say, what is the market position? Market position will be stored in the variable MP. What I like to do also, since we're talking about pyramiding, and this is where the complexity starts to increase, I like to multiply my market position by current shares. Or in this case, it'd be current contracts. We can use current contracts as well. So let's do that since we're talking futures. Okay. Did you notice how it turned blue? Once it turns blue, that means, hey, that is a built-in predefined name. It could be a function, could be an array, it could be anything. So we know we're on the right track when it turns blue. So if I'm short one contract, my market position is going to be -1 times 1. So MP is going to be -1. Now, if I'm short 2 contracts, market position is going to be -1 times 2, which is -2. So what I want to do next, the next order is, and we can just type this very quickly, if MP is equal to -1, then I want to sell short again at the next bar at open D 0 minus 6 on a stop, correct? Okay. We are going to sell here, and then we're going to sell here. Okay. So let's pull this back up. Now, before I go on, let me really quickly explain what OpenD is. OpenD is a function. It's not an array element such as open or high, low, or close. OpenD is basically saying return the opening price of the day of this intraday chart. It could be a 30-minute chart, it could be a minute chart, it could be a 2-hour chart, it doesn't matter. Whatever the opening tick of the day on this intraday chart, that value is going to be stored in OpenD subscript 0, 0 meaning today. That's nice to have because 30 minutes after the day opens, you want to see what the opening of the day was. In the old days, before this function before they had this function built in, you had to store that value once the computer realized we had a new trading bar for the day. So we don't do that anymore. So we also have, in addition to OpenD, we have high D, low D, and close D. Now, if we wanted to look at the open of the prior day, of yesterday, all you would have to do is say, put a 1 in there. And what this does, it says, okay, what is the opening price of this intraday chart yesterday? So it's very simple and very usable. So let's go ahead and just put it back to 0 because we're not concerned with yesterday, we're concerned with today. So now, if market position is equal 1, then I want to sell short at open minus 6, which would be right here. And then we're going to follow the same logic. It's very straightforward, very reasonable. If market position equals -2, then I want to sell short next bar at open D minus 9 points. Stop. Okay. Now let's see if it's always good to make sure what you've done thus far is syntactically correct, because if you have a lot of code and there's a lot of syntax errors, it's kind of hard to muddle through it. But if you do it as you go, it makes life so much more simpler. So let's go ahead and verify this. And lo and behold, it verifies. So that's good. So based on this little simple system, it looks like it should reasonably work, right? Now, the harder feature is the trailing stop mechanism. We sold here, we sold here, and we sold here. Now we got to tell the computer, once the market does make a new low, we want to trail that low. And in this case, I'm going to use 3 handles. I'm sticking with 3 on everything, just to make things simple. So once this new low has been put in, I want to trail the stop 3 handles from that new low. And lo and behold, we got stopped out there. Which isn't a bad trade, because if you look at the close of the day, you would have given up a good percentage of that profit, probably half of it or so. So let's go ahead and program that trailing stop mechanism. Okay. Now this is where it gets a little more complicated, maybe not as reasonably intuitive as you might think, but let's do this. We know we want to put the trailing stop mechanism in if we've obtained 3 positions, right? So let's go ahead and say, okay, if MP is equal to -3, we have 3 positions on, we're short 3. The negative sign denotes if it's either long or short. Negative is short, positive is long. So we're going to say if MP equals 3, then we want to buy to cover. Buy to cover means just to get out of the trade, get out of the short trade, I should say. At the low of the day, as it's being made, right, plus 3 on a stop. Okay, let's look at this real quick. Does that make sense? We've put on 3 positions. We're now long 3. Then I want to buy to cover at the low of the day as it's been made. At low of D is the low of the day, and that's updated every 5 minutes you make a new low. That function will return that new low. Once new lows are stopped, being made, low D function will retain the value of the low of the day up to that point. So makes sense. So let's go ahead and verify this, make sure this builds. And it didn't like that, and I can see why. You always have to say, and this is where I always forget it. I've been programming this language for many, many years, but I always forget you've got to type in next bar, because we're sitting on we're not sitting on the bar, the action bar right now. We're sitting on the bar prior to the action bar, meaning we always have to say next bar if we're putting stop orders in. Now, if you're doing like a market on close, you can say this bar. But all stop limit orders have to have the two keywords next bar in the instructions. You know what? I just realized I jumped the gun. I programmed the trailing stop mechanism before I did the protective stop. So let's go back and let's review the protective stop, what we want to do and how we can program that. We want to risk 3 handles on the last position that was put on. So if we put only one position on, we're going to risk 3 handles from the entry of the first position. That would be $150 in the E-minis. If we put 2 positions on, meaning that the market had moved down 3 handles and then 3 more handles, we would put a protective stop 3 handles above the second trade price or second entry price. And if the market did rally after we put that second position on, we would lose 3 handles on that second position, but we would break even on the first position. So let's go ahead and program this idea and see if it works. Remember, we're doing this on a brute force approach. So, and this is also a brainstorming approach, and this is how you program. First off, you just start typing, you think about it, you could diagram it if you like. I like to diagram things that are super complicated. If it's not super complicated, I just go ahead and start, programming. And I test it, I debug it, I test it, I debug it. So we're kind of in that stage. We are in the programming stage. We haven't yet debugged this, but we think we're on the right track. At least we hope so. So let's go ahead and say, okay, if market position is not equal to 0, meaning that we have 1 or more positions on, then we want to buy to cover, right, to get out of any positions on the next bar, and don't forget that, at the entry price plus 3 handles. Now, that looks very reasonable, and in our minds at this stage, if you've not had experience with a TradeStation, it looks like this should work. I can tell you right now that it will not work. And the reason being is the variable entry price is not updated on the last position that was put on. It only remembers the first position that was put on. So with that, let me show you some examples using this program. So let's go ahead and make sure it compiles. And it does. So we're going to apply it to the chart and see what happens. Okay, here's a trade, a couple trades, where we applied the logic we have just programmed to see if it's working properly. And like I said, I didn't think it would because the entry price doesn't maintain the last trade price. It basically remembers the original entry price or trade price. So here we put a short position on. We added another position just like our instructions had informed the computer to do so. And then we should have been stopped out right here. But our logic did not work because entry price that we're using plus 3 would be this entry price and not this entry price. I quickly applied another strategy that we'll eventually get to, and this one worked the way we wanted it to, and we'll go over that in detail. We sold 1 like we did with the original strategy that we've programmed. We sold 2, and then the market rallied 3 handles from our last entry, and we covered both positions. This was basically what we call a free trade, and this was a trade that we lost 3 handles on. So how did this algorithm solve the problem? Well, solve it temporarily anyways. Let me show you what we have to do with TradeStation. And I mentioned earlier that we can use a lot of the built-in tools that TradeStation provides, but in some cases we have to program our own tools. And the tool that we have to program is a method where we remember the last entry price. We can't use entry price, the built-in entry price, so we're going to have to create our own entry price variable. And I'm going to call it the last trade price. So let's go ahead and put a variable name at the top. Well, let's declare it and initialize it to 0. Okay. So using that variable, how can we tell the computer to remember the last trade price? Well, we can key off of our MP variable, which is very useful. So let's go ahead and, like I've said, we're brainstorming. We're typing a lot of stuff in here. This is the beginning stages. This is how you build a trading algorithm from scratch, and that's what we're doing. And we learn a lot as we go. So let's go ahead and put some logic in, which will help us remember the last trade price. So if market position is equal to -1, which means we have one position on, then I'm going to set my last trade price to the open of the day, open D, -3 handles. Okay, that's where we put our first position on, correct? The open of the day, we used a stop order, the open of the day -3. Now, if market position equals -2, then our last trade price is going to be, as you can probably figure out, it's going to be -6. Okay. If MP is equal to -3, we have 3 positions, which is the max that we want to put on any given trade, or any given day, I'm sorry. We want a pyramid up to 3, no more. We're going to put the last trade price equal to open of D -9. So there you go. So we've got a variable called last trade price, which is keeping track of every time we have a market position change. If it changes to -1, our last trade price is going to be the open -3, where we put the first short on. If it's -2, we're going to put on we're going to assign the price where the second position was put on. And finally, if we have 3 positions on, we're going to assign last trade price the price where we put the third position on, or pyramided. Now we got to go back and fix our other code now, or exit logic for the buy to cover on the protective stop. So now what we're going to do is set, instead of entry price, which we know now does not work, we're going to go ahead and put last trade price. And let's see what happens.